So today I'm speaking with a social activist in Nigeria. I just happened to have met him here when we were having lunch, and he has shared a whole realm of information with us all today. So I'm going to ask him to introduce himself so that you'll know who we're speaking with and who has shared all of this information with us.
My name is Otakwu, Chairperson, Conference of Civil Society of Nigeria, and Coordinator, Civil Military Cooperation, CIMICO. I'm glad that I'm having this conversation with my interviewer, and so we can also transmit this message to the global audience and Nigerians in diaspora that your country will always be your country and your first love will be Nigeria. We appreciate the pains, we appreciate the challenges that we are all passing through as a country and as individuals and as citizens. And we need to remind ourselves that all over the world, countries that have become synonymous on the world scene today were once in their own dark days. They had their dark experiences, but they were able to come back, sit down, and put heads together, galvanize and harness their resources, human, material, etc., to navigate their nations out of such challenges. As a country, Nigeria, we Nigerians, within and without the shores of the country, have a similar responsibility to collectively, concertedly join hands together to reinvent our country, to navigate our country through the challenges that bedevil and confront us as a country. These are surmountable. Security, economic challenges, instability, political crisis, etc. These are man-made challenges, and therefore they have man-made solutions. And God has given us all it takes, intellectually, materially, to foster solutions to our problem. So we need to all come back and reassert our commitment to our country, our indivisibility, and the need to lift our country to heights beyond the reach of mortal eyes.
Thank you so much for speaking with me. Thank you. And for all you people out there who are listening to this, share this information, like and subscribe if you like this type of content so that we'll see more of it during my trip to Nigeria. I happened to see this nice gentleman who started to talk to me about where we came from and where I came from. So I asked him if he would be on camera and talk to us about how Nigerians feel about people that were taken from Nigeria and other African countries to the Americas and the Caribbean islands. And here we are again trying to find our roots. So what are your thoughts, or maybe the general thought of other Nigerians? All right. Do you want to say your name or no? You don't have.
Yeah, generally, for those of us who are Africans and resident in Africa, who understand that Africa is a country, or rather a continent, a resource-rich continent, so stupendously blessed with enormous human and material resources. We have this knowledge of Africa, that it is a continent that has over 30% of the world's deposit of gold, that has over 64% of the world's deposit of manganese, that has over 40% of the world's potential hydroelectric power, electricity, that has upward of 60% of the world's deposit of coffee. We are rich in palm oil, we're rich in all tropical raw materials. But unfortunately,
You didn't mention oil.
we have, in Almos, we have 12% of the world's deposit of natural gas, upward of 20% of the world's deposit of oil, crude oil. So we've got about 3 countries, African countries, Gabon, Angola, Nigeria, Libya, that are members of the OPEC, Organization of Oil Producing Countries. So you could see that Africa is a continent that is stupendously and richly blessed with both natural resources and human resources. But unfortunately, again, we seem to luxuriate in some form of poverty, basically because we have not, or we do not have the best of leadership, and we do also not have the best of followership. These factors have debilitated our progress towards our destined or predestined height as a continent that has upward of 1.3 billion people, about 1.4 billion people. That's the population of India, that's the population of China. Yet in GDP, our GDP is less than $3 trillion. That's the GDP of Russia, that's the GDP of Germany, that's the GDP of France, you know. So you could see, because we have that special historical formation, aside the fact that we have poor leadership and followership. These are twin challenges that we have. The both of them affect and debilitate, reduce our level of progression to our predestined developmental height. This specific problem of race treachery, this historic formation of Africa that were products of race abuse, has also been a major factor that has reduced our development and our movement and progress towards our emancipation and our development. And I say this to mean that the history of Africa, a continent with such resources, today we are not able to measure with our contemporaries across the globe. A major factor, as I said, is our race history. How we were plunged, how we were plundered, how our resources were extracted and exported to some other countries, how our human resources were exported. And I say this to mean that if you had read one of the books authored by the former Governor General of Amalgamated Nigeria, Sir Lord Frederick Lugard, a book titled Dual Mandate in British Tropical Africa, published in 1962, where he did admit,
Right after you
independent. He published the book, and the crux and central message of the book, which he alluded to, was that the partition of Africa was due primarily to the economic necessity of increasing the supplies of food and raw materials to the industrialized nations of Europe. That these raw materials lay dormant and ungarnered in Africa because the natives did not know their use or their benefits. And therefore, who could or would deprive the hungry people of Europe their rights to explore the wasted bounties of nature? Then he went on to confess that it should be admitted at the outset that European brains, energies, and capitals have never been and will never be used for the development of Africa from motives of pure philanthropy. And that Europe was in Africa for the benefit of their own industrial class and for the mutual benefit of the native races in their aspiration to higher rank.
Right, so the Africans provide the resources and economically they benefit.
Yeah, that tends to be the confession of the Lord in that particular book, that they were not here to develop Africa for reasons of pure philanthropy. And that's one of the mistakes we make as Africans. Keep thinking that our security, our emancipation, our economic recovery and restoration and reinstatement will come from some foreign countries without us taking the lead. We forget that some of these aids advanced to Africa have strangers attached to them. And it was better defined by the Lord when He said their resources will not be used for the development of Africa for reasons of pure philanthropy.
So let me ask you this, because the Ghanaians are inviting people from the diaspora to return and maybe help their country develop. But I don't see that happening in Nigeria. So what are your thoughts about that?
There are many challenges we are grappling with as a country, which is not unique or which is not just an African phenomenon. Challenges, especially in nation building, are experiences across the globe. It depends on what methods and our preparedness, our readiness, our willingness to contend, to combat, and to surmount those challenges. We have challenges as a country. Some of them, as you may have been aware of, is one of the challenges of such nature is the insecurity problem, which evolved or developed through a contribution of many factors. Unemployment, bad economic policies, and others have contributed. Impatience, the attitude of citizens themselves, these have all contributed to the state of insecurity that has now taken a toll on development, has staved direct foreign investment, staved international donor assistances, etc. And therefore, many diasporans who are supposed to be here to develop our society find it difficult to find their ways in here. They are skeptical, they are apprehensive, they are scared, they are afraid, but they forget that there is nowhere as home. You will always be seen as a second-class citizen elsewhere in the world. But if you could have the courage, if you could have the commitment to come here and add to our developmental and security strides, I can tell you that our country can become good. And therefore, we also as Nigerians are encouraging our diasporans to come home and not just to live with this capital flight, traveling across the shores of our country. We encourage them to return, to contribute their quota to nation building, because wherever you are, you will be contributing to their development. We have the brain, we have the intellectual capacity. I just read about Thomas Fuller, and I'm sure you are aware of Thomas Fuller, who was carried from somewhere around Liberia to the United States, precisely to Virginia in 1724, when he was just 14 years of age. And he was in his mistress's house, the Coxes. Fuller was so intelligent that he was called the Virginia calculator. You may have heard about him. When he was 70, two whites came all the way from Pennsylvania to interview with him. Samuel and William Hudson and Samuel Croats. They came and interviewed him and said, Fuller, a 70-year-old man who was an illiterate, who couldn't speak English, who couldn't read or write, but he could process mathematical equations. And he was asked by his those who were curious about his intelligence, and they asked him, Sir, how many seconds were there in a man's life? Or rather, how many seconds were there in 2 years and a half? In just about 2 minutes, Fuller answered 47,300,400 seconds. And Fuller was right. They asked him the second question, and they said, Fuller, how many seconds were there in a man's life who had spent 70 years, 17 days, and 12 hours? And in less than a minute and a half, he answered and said, 2,201,500,800 seconds. In fact, when he was giving the answer, one of the white men, precisely William, halted him and said, No, Fuller, you were wrong because the figures you gave were shorter. He said, No. Fuller said you forgot to add the leap year. And when the leap years were added, Fuller was right. So that was the Virginia calculator. That was his intelligence quotient. Highly intelligent. So imagine he was in Africa. Imagine his contribution to the body of education and the body of knowledge. So you could see that Africans, especially the diaspora, and people in the Caribbean, blacks all over the world are making exploit. We wish they were home here to contribute their quota to national development. Africa will have taken its position in the Committee of Nations.
So what do you think Nigerians can do now? How do we fix this problem?
The first realization we need to have is that we can always reinvent the country. Nothing is beyond repair. In fact, if you had read Darkest Europe, you realize that Europe was worse off than what we have today in Nigeria. We had terrible situations everywhere in the world at some point or the other in their history. But there's a point of realization. And at that point, when the citizens realize that we do not have anywhere to run to and have the comfort, the measure of comfort we have here, then you would be left without a choice than to think of how you can reinvent, rejuvenate, resuscitate your own country. So first, we must realize that there is a need for us to reinvent our country rather than leaving the shores of the country, rather than encouraging this capital flight. And once we realize that, then we come back and we begin to work on our attitudes. We have that value orientation and reorientation. What are our values? Every country, to enhance their survival, must be able to define their interests, articulate their values. So we must sit back, articulate our value, redefine our value system. Then we commit ourselves to realizing those value systems and reinvent our country.
Now I hear other people are speaking as you do. Let's have there should be a plan to reinvent, but it takes a lot and it takes support from the government. What do you say about that?
Yeah. To begin with, I'm a social activist to begin with, and we have a program, for instance, on insecurity that we are tackling in Nigeria, and the program is called CIMICO, Civil Military Cooperation. We see it as a central key and cure to the problem of insecurity. And since we heightened it in the last few months, the trend of the curve of insecurity really declined because we're building cooperation. And the idea is the military essentially and basically is a state-sponsored armed force group to quell external aggression and not to be dragged into internal security operations. So primarily the role of the military is to guide the territorial integrity of the country. The constabulary role of internal security is for the public, which is the in internal security operations. With the insurgency and terrorism in the country, the Nigerian military precisely have been dragged into internal security operations. So it is seen as an unfamiliar terrain. And for the military to realize the objective within, there is a need for that civil military cooperation. One of the lead advocates of civil military relations, William Adama, Battlestar Galactica commander, Admiral William Adama, once said that the military is trained to restrain and fight against external aggressors, while the police is trained to serve the people, the citizens within. If the military is dragged into internal security operation, the military would see the citizens as the enemies of the state, and it has implication. So what we are doing on this project, first, we believe that Nigeria is reinventable, and we are promoting CIMICO, civil military cooperation, at our level, and it's gaining ground and gaining currency, and many citizens are keen into it, and we are forging that cooperation, that non-adversarial resolution between our military and citizens. There is that issue of human rights respect. You have less cases of human rights abuse from the military because we are forging and foisting this cooperation. Now, many other Nigerians like myself and who we've been able to reach out to are beginning to believe in the country, believing that the country can take its place as a lead country in the world scene. We could actually make the country a synergy on the world scene. So many Nigerians are beginning to believe in this. And for those who are believing in the country, we are reaching out to ensure how we can galvanize and mobilize towards this value reorientation. One of the key points, or one of the nearest entry points, is the 2023 elections coming up. Because we need to have good and stable leadership and followership to guarantee a good, united country. So we are looking at the 2023 election as a threshold, as an entry point through which we can implement some of the good thoughts and good visions we have about the country. So back to your question, and to just give it a more succinct response. We have a whole range of persons who are beginning to re-examine the situation and reassert their belief and their commitment to the country, believing that if we all work towards one goal, if we all reassert our commitment to a more united and formidable country, we can really make Nigeria a synergy, and people will start flocking back to the country.
So, what would you say for those in the UK, America, the Caribbean, who want to return to Nigeria? Because you hear them returning to other countries. How about those who want to return to Nigeria, or maybe even be a part of your group? What action would they take, or how do they contact your group or groups like yours?
A group is called the Conference of Civil Society of Nigeria, or Civil Military Cooperation Network. Either of them, you could reach out to us, but our central message to Nigerians all over the world is that our country is a very unique country. Despite our challenges, we are unique, and we are committed. For some of us, we are here unwilling to go anywhere, unwilling to escape, in quote, anywhere. And we are encouraging other Nigerians and countrymen who reside outside the shores of the country to come in here so that we can put our heads together and see how we can better the lots of the people, see how we can reinvent our country, see how we can add value to our local tropical raw materials, see how we can boost industrialization, see how we can de-risk our enterprise environment, see how we can step up our economic system, re-examine and rejig our economic ecosystem to have a much more viable economy, to have a much more productive, a system that is productive, that we can be major exporters of our produced or products and flood the global market with products of Nigerian origin. This we encourage other Nigerians elsewhere to come back so that we can put heads together, put our hands on the deck, and work for the progress development of our country. We acknowledge and we are not in any way oblivious of some of these challenges we have with the country, but we have admitted and decided to face it headlong to solve the problem passionately. We are willing to solve the problem, and the problem is solvable. We don't like it, we are not enjoying it, but again, nobody can absorb him or herself completely out of the collective damage we have done to the country. We all have contributed in one way or the other. We've all contributed in one way or the other. We have all contributed to the damage that has been wreaked upon this country in one way or the other. A few days ago, I had the privilege of addressing a cross-section of Nigerians, and I reiterated to them that the challenges we have were created collectively by all of us, either in the religious houses, our traditional institutions, our governance system, the civil society, etc. We've all contributed in one way or the other, and therefore the onus of salvaging and rejigging, recalibrating our responses and reinventing the country lies on all of us collectively. And the diasporans also must admit this so that we can all come back from anywhere we are and see how we can solve the problem.